The forest kingdom breathes in silence. Chapter 11. What Lira adds to the map. The second day was quieter than the first. The water was unchanged. The morning tasks of the quiet kin continued their ambient texture. The valley held its accumulated life as it always held it. Quieter in the sense that she and Cael moved through it differently. The first day had been the day of understanding, of the map room and the meal and the moss light, and the accumulated weight of realizations arriving in sequence, each one requiring processing, each one reorganizing the frame through which the next one arrived. The second day was the day after understanding, the day of simply being in a place now that the place was known, or known as much as a place like this could be known in 2 days by 2 people who were guests. She spent the morning at the channel. Not the wide, flat main channel, the elevated one. The narrower tributary that ran along the cliff-face shelf 20 feet above the valley floor. She had found, in the early morning, when the light was at its most directional, a way up to the shelf level via a series of the natural fractured ledges on the eastern cliff face, each one a manageable step, the route requiring attention but not difficulty. From the shelf, she could see the channel up close, in a way she had not been able to from below the cut of it. The specific engineering of its bed, the places where the stone had been replaced in sections, and the replacement was visible as a slightly different color, a slightly different texture, a maintenance record written in the stone itself. She sat on the shelf beside the channel with her legs hanging over the edge and looked at the valley from this height. Different again. The valley had, she was finding, a different face at every elevation and every hour, each one equally accurate, none of them complete. You could not see this place from one position. It required accumulation, the building of a composite from many viewpoints, many hours, many qualities of light, which was exactly what the cartographer had done, had lived here long enough that the composite was not something they had to assemble from notes, but something they carried in their body, the way you carried the layout of your childhood home. Cael was below with the horses. She could see him from the shelf, a small, unhurried figure moving along the main channel, leading Fen and the bay to the basin where the 3 tributaries met, letting them drink in their turn. He had his free hand in his coat pocket, which meant he was handling a leaf, which meant he was thinking about something he had not yet formed into words. She watched him for a moment, the way you watched people you had traveled with long enough to read at a distance. He was comfortable. That was the word. Not comfortable in the way of someone relaxing, but comfortable in the way of someone who had found a relationship between themselves and a place that required no management. He moved through the valley floor without looking down at his feet. He knew the ground here now, the give of the dark soil, the places where the ground cover was thickest, the slightly firmer path beside the channel. He had been reading it since they arrived, the way he read all ground, and now the reading was complete and he was simply moving through it. She turned back to the channel. The map tube was in her hand. She had brought it without planning to. It had been beside her in the recess when she rose, and she had taken it as she took her boots and her coat, by habit, without the decision being made anywhere she was aware of. She opened it and drew out the map. In the morning's more directional light, with the valley below her and the channel beside her and the cliff face at her back, she looked at the map and saw something she had not seen from the stone table or the map room or any of the positions from which she had examined it across the preceding day and a half. She was past the stage of finding new marks, something about the relationship between the marks she already knew, the two leaves. She had understood them as a pair, the corner leaf for departure, the center leaf for origin, the outside and the inside, the letter and the place it was sent from. She had been right about that. She was still right about that. But she was looking at them now simultaneously, both at once, the corner and the center, the map's beginning and the map's heart, and she saw something in the pair that she had not seen in either separately. They were the same leaf, not just the same species, the same drawing, the 5 fine lines, the specific angle of each vein, the slight irregularity in the 3rd line from the left, where the pen had been lifted and replaced. Identical. Not the similarity of 2 drawings of the same subject, but the identity of a single drawing reproduced exactly. The corner leaf and the center leaf had been made from the same hand in the same moment of attention, the pen moving with the same pressure and the same speed, producing marks so alike that only putting them side by side in good light revealed they were not the same physical mark on the same location of the paper. The cartographer had drawn the leaf twice, once at the origin, once at the edge. The same leaf, in both places, not departure and arrival as opposites, but departure and arrival as the same thing, the same act, made once from the inside and once from the margin, connected by the line of intention that ran between them across the blank space of the map's center. She sat with this for a long time. The channel ran beside her, its mid-register the clearest sound from this elevation, the low resonance present but submerged beneath it, the high bright thread audible at the top if she listened for it. She listened for all 3, separately and then together, the way she was looking at the 2 leaves separately and then together. The same leaf, twice, one for where you are, one for where it's going, and the cartographer's understanding, 600 years old, encoded in the simple act of drawing the same mark in 2 different positions on the same document, that these were not 2 different things, that the place you were and the place the thing you made would go were connected not by distance but by intention, that you could be rooted in a valley at the bottom of a layered forest and still send something outward that carried your exact attention with it, undiminished, across whatever distance it needed to cross. She thought about what she had told Cael the night before. They were not waiting. They were tending the channels, keeping the maps copied, sending them out and trusting the world to do the rest. She had understood this as the cartographer's patience, the patience of someone comfortable with not knowing the outcome. She understood it differently now. Presence. The cartographer had not been waiting for someone to arrive. They had been here, fully, doing the work of being here, and they had sent the map out from that fullness, having something worth sending, being somewhere worth describing. The map was not a plea or an advertisement or a monument. It was the natural consequence of being so completely in a place that the place overflowed slightly, pressed outward through the available means, found its way into the hands of whoever was positioned to receive it. 600 years later, those hands were hers. She set the map flat on her knee. She looked at the blank space at the center, the cartographer's standing point, the place from which everything on the map had been seen. She looked at the center leaf pointing outward toward the structures. She looked at the corner leaf in its position of departure. She reached into her coat for the small notebook she carried. Not a journal, just a working notebook, its pages cross-hatched in pale gray for use as a drawing surface. She found the pencil clipped to its spine. She pulled the leather loop from her finger, the one Senna had placed at her position on the table, dried and warm, the placeholder, and set it on her knee beside the map. She looked at the corner leaf one more time, very carefully, with the brass lens. 5 lines. The slight irregularity in the third. The specific pressure of a pen held by a particular hand. She put the lens away. She set the pencil to the map's margin, the lower left margin, the opposite corner from the cartographer's leaf, and drew. Not a leaf. She was not from this valley. She did not have the cartographer's authority to place that mark, and she did not want it. What she drew was smaller and more personal, and entirely her own. The loop. The dried loop Senna had made for her, the placeholder. She drew it in the margin with the care she brought to maps. The way you recorded a weather observation or a landmark, accurately, completely, without embellishment. Her mark. Alongside theirs. She was aware that her hands were very steady. She had expected them not to be. This was not the mechanical steadiness of routine work, but the steadiness of concentrated stillness, the kind that came when the body understood that it was doing something it would not have occasion to do again. She drew the loop in 3 strokes. She lifted the pencil. She looked at what she had made. Small, precise, in her own hand, which was different from the cartographer's, looser in the curves, more economical in the straight lines, the particular handwriting of someone who had spent 12 years in archives developing a script optimized for accuracy rather than beauty. But it was hers, and it was on the map, and it would be there tomorrow, and the year after, and the decade after that, aging into the paper the way everything aged into the things it was added to, becoming part of the document's history, the way Cael's leaf had become part of the shelf's record. She did not add her name. She had thought she would, coming up the cliff face with the tube in her hand, that she would write her name in the margin, as the cartographer had written theirs, not with letters, but with a mark. But sitting here now with the pencil and the map, she understood that the loop was sufficient. More than sufficient. The loop said everything the name would have said, and said it in the language of the place, in the language of Senna's making, which was a better language for this document than any she could have brought from outside. She sat for a moment with the map on her knee and the pencil in her hand, and looked at what the margin now contained, the cartographer's leaf and her loop, 2 marks in 2 different hands at opposite corners of the same document, with the whole map between them and the whole 600 years between them and the whole distance between outside and inside between them, all of it present in the space of a piece of paper she could fold into a tube and carry under her arm. She heard footsteps below, not Senna's. The weight of them was different, more deliberate, the step of someone climbing toward rather than moving along. She looked over the shelf's edge. Cael was on the ledges below her, making his way up. He had found the same route she had used, to the natural fractured steps on the eastern cliff face, and he was ascending them with the careful, tested confidence of someone who had looked at them from below and determined they were manageable. He had his journal in his left hand. the pressed one, held away from the cliff face to protect it from the damp stone. He reached the shelf level and sat beside her, his legs hanging over the edge as hers did, looking out at the valley below. The horses were tied at the main channel, both with their heads down, in the posture of horses who had eaten and drunk and had no immediate requirements. He looked at them for a moment with the satisfaction of someone whose responsibilities were, temporarily, entirely met. Then he looked at the map on her knee. She held it toward him without speaking. He took it and looked at the lower left corner, at her mark. He looked at it for the length of time. He looked at things he was reading carefully. He turned the map over, checking, as she had done, that the mark was on the paper and not the image of something underneath it. He turned it back. He looked at the corner leaf in the opposite corner. He looked at her loop. He looked at the space between them, the whole map, the whole distance, the cartographer's valley rendered in their intimate hand with the translation overlay and the two positioned leaves. And now, at the opposite corner, her mark. He said nothing for a long time. She did not need him to. He handed the map back. She rolled it carefully along its existing creases and returned it to the tube and clicked the clasp. The map settled into the tube with the small sound of paper meeting leather, the sound she had heard 100 times in the preceding months without thinking about it, which she was thinking about now. Cael opened his own journal, the pressed one, the leaf record. He opened it to the back pages, to the most recent editions from this valley, and looked at them. The valley floor ground cover, the elder tree leaf, the fern frond, the dark green ledge plants. He looked at them with the expression she had come to know, simply being with the record of where he had been. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a leaf she had not seen him collect. Broad, deeply lobed, the underside pale with fine hairs. She recognized it as a species from the western section of the cliff face, the part they had not yet visited but had seen from the ledges. He had gone there this morning, while she had been at the elevated channel, and he had not mentioned it because it had not required mentioning. He had gone, and he had gathered what he found, and he had returned. He pressed the leaf into the journal's back pages carefully, centering it on the page, pressing it flat with his thumb. He closed the journal. He held it against his chest for a moment, the way you held something you were not ready to set down yet. She watched him and understood, without having to look directly at the understanding, what she was watching. She had known him for 2 years as a traveling companion, as someone reliable and economical and genuinely attentive to the world through which he moved. She had known the journal, the leaf collection, the pressed record of everywhere he had been. She had never asked why he kept it, because she had assumed she understood. Documentation, the traveler's habit, the professional record of someone who worked in the field and needed to remember. She had been wrong about that, the way she had been wrong about the map. It was not documentation, or it was documentation, but documentation was the least of it. It was the same thing the cartographer had done, the overflow of presence, being so completely in a place that some of it had to be taken forward, not as memory, which was imprecise and subject to improvement, but as matter, an actual piece of the place, pressed flat and held. Something the place had produced that now travelled with him. carrying the specific chemistry of that specific soil in its cells, drying slowly into a permanent record of having been somewhere and having paid attention. He kept leaves the way she kept maps, not because the information was useful, because the act of keeping was the act of honoring, of saying to the place, I was here and I knew I was here, and I made a record so that the knowing would not dissolve into the general mass of living, but would retain its specific shape. She had been living alongside this for 2 years, without understanding it. She said, looking at the valley below, "When did you start?" "The journal." He looked at the valley with her. He thought about it for the length of time it deserved. "I was 12, he said. "I found a leaf I couldn't name, and I pressed it to take to someone who could. And by the time I found someone who could, I had 6 more. He paused. "I never stopped finding leaves I couldn't name." She thought of herself at 12. She had been in the estate library, looking at a map of a coastline she would never visit, running her finger along the shore the way the cartographer's pen had run before her. The leap of it, the understanding that a person had stood on that shore and looked at it and found a way to fold that, looking into something she could hold. The sense of contact across distance and time, the sense that the distance and time were not, in fact, the barriers they appeared. She had never stopped finding maps that made her feel that. She said, "I have a shelf of tubes at home, 43 of them, each one a different map." She paused. "I've told people it's a collection, a professional archive. I've never told anyone it's because I can't let them go." He looked at her. She did not look back. She was watching the valley, the channel below reflecting its pale daylight version of itself, the horses still and content at the water, but she felt the quality of his attention, the complete, non-demanding attention that she had been surrounded by since entering this valley, and that she recognized now, from him, with a small shock of familiarity. He had always looked at her this way. She had always been too busy documenting the world to notice. She said, 43 maps, and none of them this one." He was quiet. "This one I will give back," she said. "I will find the right way to say what it is, and what it isn't, and who should know it, and I will be careful." She touched the tube. "The cartographer was careful. I can learn that." She thought of the translation overlay, the formal notation added to the personal map, the minimum necessary vocabulary, enough to make it legible, not so much as to expose what should remain interior. The cartographer had understood that the map could be both sent outward and not betrayed, that it was possible to share a thing in a form that reached the right people without dismantling what made it worth sharing. She could do that. She had 12 years of understanding how knowledge moved through the world's archiving systems, and she could use that understanding the way the cartographer had used it. The next person who would hold the copy and carry it toward a valley that the map kept being right about. The 16th. Cael had opened his journal again. He was looking at the collected leaves, all of them, from this journey and from before, the accumulated record of every significant ground he had walked. He looked at them with the expression she had been trying to name for 2 years, and could now name precisely, the expression of someone who had been keeping faith with something they loved, and was, in a moment of rest, able to look at the evidence of that faithfulness and find it good. She wanted to tell him this. She turned toward him to say it and found that he was already looking at her, with the same expression turned outward from the journal and directed at her, and she understood that whatever she had been about to say was already contained in that expression, and had been for some time. She looked at the valley instead, at the valley and the channel and the bridges and the structures integrated into the cliff face and the elder trees with their internally luminous bark and the ground cover that forgot you had passed almost as soon as you had passed, and all of it held in the particular patience of a place that had decided what it was going to be and had been it, uninterrupted, for 600 years. She thought, I have been here 2 days, and I already know I will spend the rest of my life knowing this valley existed. Not the way you knew a fact, the way you knew a piece of music that had changed the key in which you heard everything else. The loop was on her finger again. She had put it back without noticing when she had replaced the map in the tube. She looked at it in the valley light, dried and warm, and sized exactly for this finger, made before she arrived. Waiting in the patient way, the valley waited for everything. Below them, Fen lifted her head from the channel and looked up. She looked directly at them on the shelf, with the large, interested calm of a horse who had decided everything was well and wanted no credit for having decided it. Cael saw it too. He made the sound, the one she had heard him make in the stables and on the road and at every morning camp, and Fen's ear moved toward it, and then she lowered her head again, satisfied. Lira pressed her palm to the shelf stone, cool and slightly damp from the channel's proximity. She left it there and felt the cold come up through the skin of her palm, and she thought, this is the last time I will touch this specific stone. And then she thought, the stone does not need me to mark it. The stone will keep this the way it keeps everything, without knowing my name, without needing to. She lifted her hand. She looked at the mark left behind the brief, faint warmth of her palm on the wet stone, already fading, the stone resuming its own temperature, forgetting her in the specific gentle way that stone forgot everything, not from indifference, but from the abundance of what it held. Below, the valley went about its morning with the continuity it had always maintained. The channels ran. The tools were in the hands of the people who used them. The maps in the map room held the valley in their patient interior gaze. One more of them now with a small mark in the lower left corner. A loop in a hand the cartographer had never known, adding itself to the record with the quiet confidence of something that belonged there. She sat beside Cael on the stone shelf, above the elevated channel in the morning light of a valley that had been breathing in silence for 600 years, and she was entirely where she was, without wanting to be anywhere else, without the instrument of herself between her and the fact of being here. The water ran its chord below them, 3 notes in their long and patient relationship, neither beginning nor ending, simply continuing. It was enough. It was, in the specific language of this place, more than enough.